Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Oh Ship. I'm Freddie Laker. Welcome to the show. If you've tuned in before, I'm glad you're back. If it's your first time, I appreciate you taking time to tune in and hear what we're all about. If you don't know the premise of the show, Oh Ship is featuring entrepreneurs and leaders and other people that I happen to have met over the years who've got great stories to tell. Typically, I love focusing in on entrepreneurs and really hearing about some of the stories that maybe aren't people's greatest, shining, most well-known moments, but maybe those are the moments that defined who they are or define the way that they work or the way that they lead. So it's really great to kind of hear the stories that other people aren't necessarily asking them for and just tapping into some of that insight that creates some of these great leaders that I get a chance to talk to. Today, I'm bringing in Brian Long. This is CEO of Attentive. Attentive is a mobile messaging platform. Full disclosure, I actually happen to be an advisor for the company, so it's doubly fun for me. Brian, welcome.
Hey, how's it going?
Doing great, man. Really glad you're here. Actually, Brian and I have a fun where we met. At the time, I was actually the head of digital for an e-commerce for Nixon, like cool surfer watch brand, and Brian actually had reached out, I think it was via email at the time, to pitch Nixon to use this really cool tech. Yeah, and I think they may have been like year one or year two of the company, pretty early on. And I was just so enamored with the tech, and Brian and I ended up, really hitting it off. And I was very lucky to end up becoming an advisor to the company. What they do, I think, is crazy relevant in a world where people are drifting further and further away from email and more into the messaging space. And so, he's seen some pretty exciting growth over the last couple of years. Worth noting that Brian actually is his second company, I think, where you're one of the founders, or the founder. He actually sold his last business to Twitter. So I think, he's got a couple stories to tell at a minimum. Really had some great experiences. So again, I'm really glad you're here.
Yeah, pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me, Freddie.
My pleasure. So I tell you where I'd love to start. I've seen you. I know you pretty well at this point. I think I'd love to get into some of the later parts of your career at some point. But what were you like, out of interest? What were you like as a kid? I mean, you're like part tech guy, you're part sales guy. Like, what was school like for you? Like, how did you come up in your career to even before you start getting into the biz world?
Yeah, I think I was probably pretty annoying. I think I have a nephew who has a lot of energy and runs around all the time, and they're always like, "Oh, it's just like Brian was all the time." So, and I'm like, "Wow, I must have been very annoying." But I think pairing that annoyance with interest in technology. Definitely not cool as far as cool goes, but hopefully not at the very bottom. I was also always the absolute shortest person until maybe like 11th or 12th grade, where I started not being the absolute. I was probably the shortest person in the grade, including both genders, until 8th or 9th grade. So lots of different things to balance.
You can't tell because it's only upper shots now, but Brian's actually 7'8" tall now.
Yeah.
So,
in my 30s, it's really where I've
How did you become like kind of a tech guy? Was it all self-taught?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think I was just always interested in it and playing around with it. Maybe getting started with simple things like games and simple computer stuff, and then you end up kind of getting pulled into other programs, and then just kind of getting deeper into it, the curious side of it.
Do you remember what your first computer was, out of interest?
Yeah, it was an Apple II. I think it was an Apple II GES was like the name.
Yeah, that's hilarious. I had someone asked me this question the other day, and in a nerd war here, and mine was it was called an Amstrad. And I remember what was so funny about it was it had a tape, basically it looked like a cassette tape, and you pop that in there and you press play, and it would kind of eventually load up the games and stuff you play. But it just seems like another world now. So just, for anyone that hasn't seen Attentive or hasn't run into it before, I'd love to give some context to what your expertise is. Could you talk a little bit around what Attentive does?
Yeah, sure. So Attentive is a mobile messaging platform, predominantly within text messaging. We think that in the next 5 years or so, most businesses will choose to communicate with their customers via mobile messaging. And we think most of that mobile messaging will happen via text messaging. Certainly we think in certain countries you're going to see Facebook or WhatsApp or, and WeChat or whatever it is. But, in the US, text is ubiquitous. Everyone knows how to do it. And if you ask almost anyone if they would rather get on the phone or deal with emailing a company versus just being able to send a text message for any type of business, unanimously people's feedback is that how they want to engage with a business is text. So that's what we do. We do it for over 1,000 companies today, particularly with a lot of e-commerce and retail and direct-to-consumer brands. I think we have about 12 or 1,300 customers active today. And we think that this can be great both for the consumer as well as for the business to really use this as a two-way communication channel. I think the marketing has been a one-way channel for a long time, and certainly the ads industry, email, which to me really is just an ad, it's not CRM, is truly a one-way channel. And I think we've got this chance to make messaging a two-way channel. So hopefully we don't screw it up.
Do you find that when you started this company, was it easier to start your second company or easier to start your first company?
Yeah, much easier to start it. I think that people kind of assume you know what you're doing when you've had a prior success.
Little do they know. No, I'm just kidding.
Yes, exactly. I was going to say though that the humbling element of starting it and it not working out, and kind of all the problems you run into, and this feeling like, before you started, how much easier it was going to be the second time, and then it was just as hard. But the actual act of starting it and getting an initial couple people together is easier, right? I think that
because people will take that leap of faith on you, basically.
Well, it's a leap of faith on you. It's also, you have to give up at the time for my first company, I had to leave a really well-paying job. That was at a startup, but it was a much later stage startup. And, you got to walk away from that. You got to walk away from your friends at that job. You got to walk away from, all the stuff you had. I also dropped out of business school. So, there's a couple things you need to do. And there are hard things to do. I think that's really what makes it hard. Whereas, if you've done those things before, it's easier to have the sort of freedom to just be like, whatever, let's go for it.
Mm. Do you both the companies you founded, you raised money with both of them, right?
Yes, we raised money from both.
Yeah, I bootstrapped a couple of my businesses, and only raised money with one of them. Ironically, it was the one where I actually had some money to work with, was the one I failed at, and the ones where I didn't have two nickels together, I managed to turn into something. Do you feel like I know you recently raised yet another round recently? How much does it change your mentality, do you think, when you're an entrepreneur and you get given this kind of these responsibility of these large chunks of money to grow your business?
Yeah, it's definitely a big responsibility, but I think it's also important to know, is this a venture backable business? Is this a business that not only should be venture backed, but also requires it? And I think that there are certain spaces that to an extent require it. You've got to have money to pay certain things and build certain things. I think that for us, we use it in order to really put the pedal to the metal and expand as fast as we can. I think on the one hand, you can look at companies like what's the company at Atlassian that was bootstrapped for a very long time. I think it was the Australian company, and and they built it up and went public, and it was a multi-billion-dollar company, and a lot of people were like, oh my God, it was great, but it was like a 10, 12 year plus journey. Yeah. And then at the same time, now you got someone like Slack who in 3 years or 4 years basically did what Atlassian took 12 years to do, and basically also abandoned their HipChat product. So I think that it was interesting. On the one hand, you could say, oh, bootstrapping, it's an incredible story, but on the other hand, sometimes if you really see that product market fit, and you think capital can help you win and grow faster, that it can be bigger. It's also a bit of a hedge sometimes, right? Like if you want to make sure you win, you gotta want to have more dry powder available to you. And if it's a really competitive game, it's nice to have more tricks in your bag.
Totally off subject, but I'm intrigued since you brought up Slack, and I'm a diehard user. I also recently got asked to use Microsoft Teams, which actually has turned out to be a really good product, and I was actually very impressed with it when I started using it. But I can't help but keep looking at Google and being like, you guys need to buy Slack. Doesn't matter what it should have bought them years ago. It doesn't matter what it costs you at this point. Do you have any feelings on the matter out of interest?
Yeah, I think that would make sense.
I feel like they need it now because
they use it, and I think that Slack also, where it's going in that enterprise world, competing against Microsoft, it's got to tie into the rest of the product suite. And I think that the issue is that Google has obviously a very well developed chat product and collaboration products of their own. So I think just dealing with I'm sure the extensive politics and saying, you know what, I know you guys have spent the last X years building the Google version, but we're going to go buy the Slack version.
Yeah. Their Slack competitors is pretty terrible. I hope they apologies to all my friends at Google, but it's pretty bad. It needs some love. So anyway, I digress.
You do see a lot more Microsoft Teams.
Yeah. So one of the things I think is kind of interesting about you is, all the chats always have you feel like such a great product and technology guy, and I as I was reflecting on today's meeting, I thought, God, actually, first I met it was in a sales capacity. I went and looked at your LinkedIn to kind of get the quick refresher before today, and I was like, you've held all these sales roles, so. Are you a tech guy that became a sales guy that became a tech guy? I, as a guy who does a little bit of both myself, I can identify with this, but I'm intrigued to hear what your take on it is and how that's happened to you.
Yeah, a couple of different things. I think one, very early on, like middle school, high school, I did learn, to program and wrote and made some games in C++ and did stuff like that. And I gained appreciation for it. But I think I also gained appreciation for the fact that I wasn't like the best at it. Like I was okay, and I probably could have done an okay job, but I wasn't like that phenomenal at it. And I think at the same time, I was definitely interested in the business side and how to get into the business side. So, I actually got more into, I think, like the product development side and design and things like that. And then I kind of quickly found out, particularly on the East Coast, that it was pretty challenging to really get into, to be able to get into a technology startup type company in that role. So, basically ended up having the opportunity to either work in consulting or work at a tech company in sales, talked to a bunch of people and just heard that sales is the best way to learn how a company actually operates, what it actually does. And also, if you want to be an entrepreneur, selling is most of your job. Whether it's recruiting people to come work with you, or trying to pitch investors, or trying to pitch your product, or pitching press to cover your product, or whatever it might be, right? You have to pitch in order to, or pitching the landlord of a place you want to rent. It's just all day long, it's pitching. I also think that the product side of the job, a lot of it is meeting with customers, like we met, and being able to hear feedback and get ideas and then going and applying them. And I think that where I've seen a lot of entrepreneurs get stuck is they spend a lot of time just building and not talking to customers, and always just sort of kicking the customer conversation on the road, or hearing what they want to hear in like a very limited number of customer conversations. And what they really need to do is just make a huge commitment and spend a lot of time talking to customers.
I think sometimes, especially people, tech and product people, can give sales guys a hard time. Might be one way of saying it. I think people don't understand the value in it. When you reflect on the fact that again, if you look at some of the VP, SVP level roles you've had in sales, you're clearly very good at it. Do you find that, like, are you proud of the fact that you've got strong in tech and in sales, or are you like a self-loathing, like it bothers you that you have to be really good at sales, but you're tech and product at your core?
No, I have a tremendous, huge respect on the sales side. I think that sales is so integral to the organization. I think people don't understand how hard it is and how much just nonstop work and drive and everything like that it takes to succeed in it. And also that the great salespeople are really smart people who are really spending a lot of time thinking about a person's responses, what they think, what they want, what they need, and channeling that feedback to product and being really thoughtful about it. Our sales team, and particularly our sales leadership, is just super, super smart folks that do that stuff. So I think that, there's also a different, people sometimes jump and think, oh, sales, and like the thing that they jump to is like, oh, it's like a used car salesman or something, someone selling something like that. And on the one hand, sales is sales, but on the other hand, it's so much different to sell a very complicated product and a complicated sales process. So I think that you've got to note that as well.
I will openly admit I've always been a little torn with it, because I like to make things. I'm a creator and a builder, and I sometimes admit I'm a little bit of a self-loathing salesperson sometimes, because I know that I get asked to be brought in to talk about these things and come talk to clients and so on. And but I guess you have to embrace these things, I guess, would be the advice I'd give anyone. I just want to quickly acknowledge we've got quite a few people tuned in across Facebook, across Instagram, across LinkedIn, across Twitter, on Periscope. So all the people that are tuned into right now, thank you very much. It's wonderful. Again, I've got Brian Long on, the CEO from Attentive. And if you do have any questions or anything you want to ask, feel free to put it in chat. I'll try my best to catch it. If you see me kind of looking around like this sometimes on the video, it's because I'm looking at other screens and kind of looking at chat that's coming in. It's not because I'm not paying attention to Brian, for the record, or watching CNN on the channel. But if you have anything, feel free to put in chat. We love getting questions in real time, and frankly, especially if it throws a curveball and screws with my friends while we're doing these live shows. So a couple more quick questions for you that I'd love to hear. I think we've covered some of the things that we know you're pretty good at. What is something that you're not good at? If you had to pick all the things within a scope of your roles as an entrepreneur and a founder, what's something you're really terrible at, or at least not good? I won't make you say truly terrible, but like something that you just like, don't ask me to do that.
I would say I'm not someone who wants to get like extremely into the details on something. In particular, I would say legal paperwork is something.
Yeah, it's a lot of people's kryptonite.
Yeah.
Make sure eyes gloss over.
My sister's a lawyer. I don't know how she does it, but I can't. I don't like that stuff.
And so, what do you think is the good solution? That just have great people, I guess, in the right places.
In the early days, hiring a great law firm, and in the later days, in the medium days, like we are now, we've got awesome in-house counsel that can just do it. Because when I was doing it, it was never done very well, and I hated doing it.
That's funny. I'll tell you one bit of friendly advice I give to anyone that's tuning in. I also hate that kind of particular work, but you gotta suck it up and get through it. I think especially if you're a CEO and entrepreneur, it's like knowing this stuff and trying to push your way through it, I think is super key. It's a real area where people can pull the wool over your eyes if you're not really on top of your A game there. So let's see. So if you're not in love with the legal side, you've gone through these growing these two businesses. You've got this interesting background between the sales and technology, but learning all the things you've done to get to this point. If you could go back in 10 years ago and say, what do you wish you could have taken? If there's one thing you could have given yourself 10 years ago, what do you think that one bit of guidance or advice would be, so you didn't make some of the mistakes you made along the way?
Well, early in my career, I worked at a big tech company, and I worked there for a few years. And I think I probably worked there like a year or two longer than I should have. It was funny. Everyone has these stories, but I had a chance to go work at LinkedIn very early on, like very early. I met Zuckerberg in like 08, and probably could have hard sold into a job there when they were still quite early. And in both cases, and not because they were the cool company that you want to go work at, but just getting involved in a startup. And I kind of had this idea that, I'll get there, but I want to really get a solid base working at a bigger place. So I think going to a small or medium-sized company earlier on, I think that there was this story that those jobs were like very risky, and that you don't go there because you're going to be in trouble, and then you'll never work in the industry again. And once you've been there, that's so far from the truth. People actually understand a lot more when it doesn't work out at a small company, but when you go to a big company and it doesn't work out, you're like, man, you must be terrible. So I think that it's funny when we look at resumes and I see someone who had a short stint at a startup or something, you're like, oh, it doesn't matter. Like, that happens all the time. But if they have a short stint at some big name brand, you're like, what happened there?
And not to put you on the spot, but I can't resist. Is there a worst job for you? You don't have to say them by name, but was there ever like a real nightmare job you've ever had in your career?
I think I've been lucky to have mostly good stuff. But I would say, I think two things that jump out to me. One, a very early job I had was actually at a clerk at like a medical office doing filing. And I was like, wow, and it was like all day on your feet, just filing files all day. And that was definitely a repetitive job. I think that overall, selling something that you're not bought in on, and that you're like proud of as being a great product. We had this really funny story where we were doing our sales kickoff in Q1, and it was at this hotel in Midtown. And in the middle of the kickoff at lunch, someone on the sales team comes up and they say, Richard Branson's having lunch at the same place that our sales kickoff is. So we get the VP of sales to go up and get him to come to our sales kickoff with 60 or 70 salespeople and come speak. So he actually comes down, to his credit, and does like a little speech because, it's Richard Branson and he's awesome. So he comes down and gives a little speech to our team. And the thing that he says, and I'm sure he said this a million times, but what he said was, if you're building the best product, there's always a place for the best. There's always a market for the best products. And I think that's something, since he said that stuck with me. And I think that it's true. And when you're in really any role at a company, if you're selling the product that aspires to be the best product, then you feel pretty good about it. And I think when I've worked at places that did not aspire to be the best, they were just aspiring to make as much money while they could, then that was a lot less fun.
I think also, especially if you're in a sales role, I think it's really hard to be connected to something that I can't speak for other own people that do sales, but I think for some of us, I find it really emotionally draining. I don't know if you're disingenuous. I just really struggle to I think a lot of times if people buy from a person like you or Brian, it's like because there's trust there, and so if I'm not, and I think people will inherently trust the expertise there, and if you can't you don't feel connected to it, and you're not really can't look them in the eye and say, this is good, you should do this. It's pretty painful from the salesperson's perspective. So, and I think clients can smell that stuff too, if you know what I mean. Like they can.
They can. It's funny. Like when you truly believe in it because you know how well it works. I think that's so palpable. Like when our salespeople can go pitch now, they know that, hey, when we run, say, a free trial, we convert like 96% of our free trials to being paying customers, and we'll launch, and that's launching hundreds, each month. So it's at a pretty big scale and pretty consistent that's how many we launch. So you can look a client in the eye and say, look, try it out for free. If it works or not, but I'll tell you that 19 out of 20 times the client's very happy and continues on, and that's your chances if you work with us. That's basically it. And I think that when you can have that, like, and I've worked in jobs where you knew that the percentage of people that bought once, the how many people that actually bought a second time was 1 in 4, 1 in 3 or something like that. So when you know that someone actually will really impact and work for them, it makes it so much easier to sell.
Hey, just jumping back to something you said earlier, since you brought it up, it kind of just triggered a thought for me. So you mentioned Richard Branson. I'm not sure if you know this, but if you actually read any of Richard's books, Richard says that my father was his mentor.
Oh, wow.
So which is kind of wild, and people forward me from time to time blog posts about it when they see articles where Richard mentions it, which is kind of wild and a little surreal for me, given that I think Richard's so amazing.
Well, that's awesome. And a good humble brag. I like that.
We'll talk about that one. Talk about one offline. Did you have a mentor, or is there someone that influenced you massively in your career?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I've been really lucky to have a series of great mentors. I think the most obvious one, you start off with, my dad being a great mentor, and
yeah, me too.
great family people, so making the same connection as you. Although I'm not, I'm not sure my dad is also Richard Branson's.
Was your dad an entrepreneur, or just you were just a great man that you?
I just think that there are certain values. In our company, we'll look at those values, but there are certain guiding values, like just having integrity, that seem obvious. But man, once you work in enough companies, work in enough places, there's a lot of companies that don't value integrity. So I think that there are certain things that are very true there. And then, through my career, also have been lucky to have folks, early managers and folks like that really helped and gave lots of guidance. And even now, our investors, of which there are investors of ours now, that have been really helpful mentors as well as investors.
That's great. Is your dad still around, if you don't mind me asking?
He is, yeah.
That's great, man. Good. Spend as much time with your dad as you can. I wish mine was still around.
You can't do it right now, obviously. Because of quarantine, but once it ends, yes.
Yeah. It's always video calls. So, how's on that note? How's the isolation of COVID been treating you? Been okay overall?
Yeah, I'm living in New York City, so obviously, I feel like people in New York are maybe more impacted than a lot of other folks that you engage with. We went and saw our family that lives in the Philadelphia region, and they take it seriously, but it's not the level of I think safety and feeling that you get being in New York. All of that being said, I think that we've been extremely fortunate. Our jobs, both myself and my wife and our companies, able to do it completely remotely, right? Our company has been remote since the beginning of March. So, we've been very fortunate to be able to do that.
I assume in New York, every morning you kind of open your windows up on your apartment. It's kind of like coming to America. And you're like, good morning, my neighbors. It's like that. No, not really.
Probably not. I can't do it as well as that. I love Coming to America, classic movie. I know exactly what you're talking about, but
did you see that? They're coming with a sequel soon.
Oh, really? That's cool.
Yeah, to bring your city a whole back, the whole thing. Gotta hope it's good. That really is like a top 10 all-time movie for me. I'm hoping they don't botch it.
I hope they don't ruin it, because that and Trading Places are like classics.
Someone told me they were considering doing a Goonies sequel recently. I was like, please don't. Just let that one lie where it is. So, I guess, I think this is probably a great place to wrap for the day. I really enjoyed that. I knew you were going to be a great guest. You got such a great, interesting background. I'm very excited to see what you continue to do with Attentive. For anyone who's out there, if you haven't had a chance to research Brian before, definitely check out Attentive Mobile. They're just a fascinating company with a really, really cool product. Maybe well, first off, I always enjoy chatting with you in real life outside of the show, but maybe we'll have a chance to bring you back in a year from now, and you can tell us what new lessons you've learned and new stories.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Freddie. It was a pleasure.
Great. Thanks, Brian.
Take care.
Everyone, take care. And also worth noting, if you want to follow us on social, twitter.com/OShipShow. We're also OShipShow at Facebook. You can find us at oshipshow.com. Or if you want to connect with me on LinkedIn, it's linkedin.com/IN/Freddie Laker. Feel free to follow me there or connect, and you're always getting into the live broadcasts we're doing on linkedin.com. Thanks again for tuning in, and we'll see you next week on OShip.